Hello and welcome to the Scientology Money Project on YouTube with your host, Jeffrey Augustine. Today we got an interesting case to cover. It's something we've been working on for 5 years. That's Scientologist David Gentile and GPB Capital. And before we get to that, I want to welcome Wayne. Hello, always glad to see you. Hi, Denise. This was kind of a last minute, so I just got some court docs today and I want to share it. And part of why I cover GPB Capital Holdings and David Gentile and his criminal co-defendant, Jeffrey Schneider, is because there are 15,000 investors in GPB Capital who invested $1.8 billion. So I've been covering it for the investors, for the Scientology watching community, true crime community, and essentially GPB Capital Holdings is like Grant Cardone's firm. It's private equity. And private equity is illiquid. The private equity firms lock up your money for 5 to 10 years or until there's an exit. And they pay you distributions. And that's it. Now, in the court documents, Scientologist Ethan Suplee shows up in the mix. And was something I want to know about, but I'll show you what I have. And what we're going to cover today, David Gentile, the sentencing guidelines, when you're convicted of a crime, the court will have a pre-sentencing report. And basically the government will lay out its case for the sentence it wants to give you. It wants to recommend to the court. And then the defendant or defendants, in this case, Jeffrey Schneider of Austin, Texas, who owned Ascendant Capital. And the way it worked is GPB Capital was the private equity firm, and Jeffrey Schneider of Ascendant Capital was the placement agent for GPB Capital paper. So Ascendant Capital sold to broker-dealers throughout the U.S., and they promised broker-dealers high commissions to sell GPB Capital paper to investors. And these are accredited investors, which is part of the argument Gentile will make. When I read the sentencing guidelines, shockingly, given the crime that David Gentile was convicted of, and he's convicted of five felonies, the sentencing guidelines call for 1,020 months or 85 years. So David Gentile, at least according to the sentencing guidelines, and I'll explain this, could be looking at 85 years. And that David Gentile, I believe, is 58 years old, so he would die in prison. Hi, Alex. I'm glad you're here from Lisbon. Always good to see you. Welcome. So 85 years in prison when you're 58 years old. Now, and Jeffrey Schneider was convicted of 4. So will David Gentile get sentenced to 85 years in prison? How does Ethan Suplee go into the mix? Well, we're going to go through a couple of documents, and it's going to be, we're not going to get way into the weeds, but these are very interesting documents, and it kind of shows you how the criminal process works once you get into the hands of the feds. And that's something you never want to do. It's just better to obey the law. There is one school of thought that says that if Gentile and Schneider hadn't broken the law, they would have gotten rich legitimately, but they did break the law. There was a 7-week trial, and David Gentile, to date, I believe, has spent about $120 million of investor money on legal defense for civil and criminal cases. And the investors were on the hook, GPB Capital investors were on the hook to pay his legal fees. Gentile went to Delaware Chancery Court and sued to make the investors pay his legal fees, because when you sign a private equity investment contract, you agree to pay the legal fees of the partner. In this case, GPB Capital, David Gentile was the sole partner, manager, owner. and you agree to pay his legal fees and that of his staff, and that even applies in for errors and omissions and criminal charges. Now, it'll be likely that David Gentile will be ordered to pay back the legal fees, and it will be very likely that he'll be subject to federal forfeiture, where the government will take all of his assets. So there's still a lot to come. In a complex financial case like this, you're ordered to pay restitution to the victims, and there's a federal forfeiture. One of the three co-defendants, there were Jeff Lash, made a plea deal for 10 years, and he forfeited $3 million. He was a minor player, but he was a co-founder of GPB Capital back in 2012. Michael Cohn was I believe, the chief financial officer for a while, and he worked for the federal government. I believe I forget which agency, but he rifled their files and gave David Gentile and Jeffrey Schneider inside information. He was charged with a crime for accessing government computers and letting Schneider and Gentile know what the government had on them in exchange for a $400,000 a year job. And the government got to him. He wore a wire, as I understand it. He was given basically house arrest, but he had to testify, or I'm sorry, he had to wear a wire and cooperate. So the cast of characters in GPB Capital this began in 2018. That's when the government moved on them, and that was Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So anyway, let's just get to what you came here to see. This is what you present if you're convicted of a crime. Your attorney will present a sentencing memorandum, and that opposes the government's memorandum. So this is just fascinating to me because it is a true crime. So let me share the screen on what David Gentile wants to tell the court all about himself. And so this is the United States District Court, Eastern District Court of New York. And these guys, that district does not, this is like the Southern District. They don't mess around. They have a very high conviction rate. 39-page document. It's document number 254 if you want to go on Pacer. And you can see the red heading across the top. If you go to Pacer to get legal documents, you pay for them. They're not that much money. In a big case, they are. My Pacer bills can get quite high. So you can see the red stripe at top. All the documents are numbered. So in this case, there have been 524 documents filed by now convicted felon David Gentile and his lawyers. 524 documents. That's how you can burn through $120 million in legal fees between 8 states' attorneys general suing you, a class action, criminal prosecution. That's how you can burn through that much money. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the show. This is interesting stuff. It is interesting stuff. So it's captioned United States of America against David Gentile and Jeffrey Schneider defendants, and you get the case number. So that's how you look at the caption, United States of America. I would never want to be United States of America against me. This is why it pays to obey the law. That's all you have to do. Obey the law. Just don't, don't fuck around and find out. Just obey the law. And, it's that simple. So, because if the government gets you, especially the feds, you are in big trouble once you're in the system. Okay, so there's the table of contents. Now you can see it says David Gentile's personal life. So what he's going to do is he's going to tell the court about his personal life the offense conduct, what he did, the sentencing guidelines, why he should not get 85 years, and the conclusion. So this is how you lay it out, and this is what the judge will be reading, or the court. You call the judge the court because of the judge. She is the court. And so then you're going to cite a table of authorities, because within the body of your argument, you're going to say other case law to support your argument. So you're always going to have those. Sometimes the table of authorities is very interesting to read. And I think my associate is here. You want to come here? Come here. Hold on a minute. Hold on. Come here. I have, oh, hold on a minute. Hold on. Bear with me for a minute. Come here. Yes, okay. You just hold on. I know. What I want to show you. Let's just go. Okay, this is Felix. Look at my beautiful rag doll. This is my associate. Felix, you want to say hi? What's that, Felix? I know. Oh, she's getting... So Felix came in. Is he a beautiful cat? I love the ragdoll. So my original ragdoll, Felix, God rest his soul. Hello. Okay, I'll let you go. And I had left the door open, and Felix came in to say hi. Hit like it matters. Yes, smash that like button. Smash it. So I want to show you my cat. And Felix likes to walk across the keyboard like that's a cat thing, I guess, walking across keyboards. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so table of authorities shows you other cases. And interesting, in a lot of the cases I work where I read a lot of legal documents, I work with law firms, and an attorney will give me documents to read. I'm not a lawyer, but they are germane to my research or whatever I'm investigating. And Scientology pops up in a lot of cases, surprisingly. Scientology has had so much litigation. I know, Heidi, Felix is just a real cutie pie. It's a she. My original Felix was a he, and we lost him. Karen and I rescued Felix. So I've named my new ragdoll Felix, just because it's like, I miss Felix, but I have my new kitty. So I'm really love cats. So this is all the stuff they're going to cite, blah, blah, blah. These are all the preliminaries, but look at all this. That's just what this means is that I believe his lawyers are about $900 an hour, $900 to $1,200 an hour. So this is why they like to cite this. And then these rules here, they'll always cite federal criminal procedure. So when you get a case like this, you know that you are in deep shit. And other authorities in blah, 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 blah. But look at this. The longer you have the table of authorities, that's kind of a giveaway that you're in a lot of trouble. And you're going to throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. This is what Captain David Miscavige does in his legal filings. Okay, so the preliminary statement, it starts out at the top. David Gentile is a loving and devoted father to 4 children, husband, son, brother, uncle, cousin, colleague, friend, and the quintessential patriarch of his large extended family. Okay, so he's just a devoted father who happened to, take 15,000 investors for $1.8 billion. Man. Hey, Wayne. Cats are cute psychos. Hubbard didn't seem to like cats. No, I more take the Egyptian that they're special sacred animals, but some people think cats are psychotic. There's even a Facebook group. Oh, hi, Charmichael. Cat Cam. Oh, yes. Thank you for being our. What does EDB mean? Our EDB, please let me know. Okay, so David's, okay, so you're not going to say he's a criminal. Okay, now it talks about how David, in this first paragraph, that David worked for 35 years, and then he uses Scientology language. Now, this the first paragraph, what I've just highlighted, it says, this conviction is a total aberration and what has otherwise been a successful and honorable life and career. So this conviction is a total aberration. That is a total aberration. That is such a Scientology word. It would be, if Hubbard read it, it would say, this conviction is a total aberration. What has otherwise been a successful and honorable life and career. So, Emily D. Baker. Oh, thank you. Okay, got it. Thank you. I didn't pick that up. So this conviction, you take us through criminal civil legal cases like she does, but relevant to Scientology. Well, thank you. That's very nice to say. Is it Carmichael? You don't have, anyway, I appreciate that. So he's saying it's a total aberration, like it's something that shouldn't have happened. And in Scientology, you would call it a departure from the ideal scene. So in Scientology, you have what the ideal scene should be. The ideal scene should be David Gentile not in prison for 85 years. So David Gentile in prison for 85 years would be a departure from the ideal scene. That would be an understatement. Oh, it's pronounced Char like Charlotte. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I always say there's things that you read and until you hear them spoken, you don't know how it is. So Charlotte, thank you. I appreciate that. Michael. Okay. Yeah, that's some Scientology terms like an ARC break. It's written ARC. And some people will read it as an arc, like, an arc break, but it's ARC. So some things you have to hear because you don't, and I'm very much like that. And sometimes I'll even go on the internet to look it up and have it pronounced for me, especially on some legal terms and some other terms. I'll get Google to tell me how it's pronounced. So a departure from the ideal scene for a Scientologist would be being in prison for 85 years. That would be a departure from the ideal scene. And in Scientology, one thing you do is set up your ideal scene. And Tom Cruise used that language when he interviewed in 2005, that Matt Lauer interview where he went batshit crazy on psychiatry and he criticized Brooke Shields for using psychiatric medications to treat her postpartum departure. He said, Matt, Tom Cruise said, Matt, what would be the ideal scene? The ideal scene would not be to have kids on psychiatric drugs. No, Tom, that's your ideal scene. A lot of people benefit by those drugs. They're life-saving. So for you, as someone who hates psychiatric drugs, Tom said, even before I was a Scientologist, I always hated psychiatry. No, you didn't, Tom. No, you were a snaggle-toothed youngster who happened to have talent for acting. Otherwise, you would have been managing a 7-Eleven night manager. Okay, so I'm going to work psychiatric drugs into this, David Gentile, because it's germane. Okay, so the conviction is a total aberration. Now, this next paragraph, the lawyers here, quote, David's world was turned upside down when he was charged and the jury returned a guilty verdict on securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit each in connection with the disclosures made by 3 funds under the management of GPB. Yeah, no kidding. But again, let me get this over here. As I mentioned, the trial lasted 7 weeks, and the jury only took 4 hours to deliberate and find David Gentile guilty of 5 felonies and his criminal co-defendant, Jeffrey Schneider, guilty of 4 felonies. So, but look at that language. David's world was turned upside down. Well, how fucking inconvenient is that for David? Yeah, when you rip off 1.8 billion and you defraud 15,000 people, um, look, a lot of David Gentile's victims were senior citizens who'd put in their $250,000 in life savings, and they thought they were going to get a 6% return or an 8% return, whatever the broker dealers pitched them, and they thought that would be good. So David's acting like he's the victim. David's world was turned upside down when he was convicted. Oh, isn't that just too bad? You know, you rip off people, you commit a crime, the jury only takes 4 hours to convict you after a 7-week trial. They see right through you. You've destroyed people's lives. Many of those people died broke because they gave you their life savings. You lied to them. You did commit wire fraud. You did commit the crimes. But your life's turned upside down. Yeah, I like that. Oh my God, the conviction turned my life upside down. How dare you? Yeah, he's playing a victim, and it's very insulting. Um, Tom Cruise doesn't know anything about psychiatry. No, but he knows. Yeah, like this, Judge. Jail is not my ideal scene. Okay, and the judge go, "Oh, I didn't realize we were having a departure from the ideal scene." I like that phrase. You can use it on your friends who don't know Scientology language. You go, stop, stop. And I did this to one of my friends once who doesn't know the Scientology lingo, the cult talk. He wanted to do something that would involve me spending money on some investment of his. And it was a stupid idea. It's like I said, no, stop, Matt. That would be a departure from the ideal scene. And it's a great phrase to use on people. So, yeah, David Gentile's life was turned upside down. Yeah, when you're convicted in federal court on 4 felonies and you're looking at up to 85 years, yeah, that's going to turn your life upside down. So, and I'll post this on my blog. And so, blah, blah, blah. I've just highlighted. Now, there's a probation report. Now, this is where it says first, while probation asserts that the correct guidelines, that's sentencing range, is 1,020 months, a staggering 85 years of imprisonment, its calculations are simply wrong. That's what his lawyers were saying. So the guidelines for the crimes committed by David Gentile is 1,020 months. I was guessing it at 50 years before, based on previous frauds, but the way they calculate it, they have a point system to calculate. And those of you familiar, I'll get to his actual point, what points they gave him. So a staggering 85 years of imprisonment. Yeah, that's, again, that is a departure from the ideal scene. Yeah, no kidding. Oh, I'm sorry if you hear dogs howling in the background. Those are my 2 Borzois. Borzois do a chorus, and Karen will shush them up. Sometimes Borzois howl like that. The dog chorus. I mean, other dogs do. When. Um, I like this. Ooh, they used italics. It must be serious. I know it is serious. A staggering 85 years of imprisonment. That's but in all fairness, Xenu was locked up forever in an eternal mountain prison powered by, Hubbard said, eternal batteries. Xenu was locked up in an electronic mountain prison. I guess, where would you get batteries for an eternal mountain prison? Like Duracell? What brand how would you power those? No, actually, it'd have to be a nuclear something with a half-life of trillions of years. Anyway, let's get back to the real stuff. So they're talking about a 1,020 month or 85 years in prison. I can imagine David Gentile's shock when he saw that. Okay, now, most significantly, the PSR means pre-sentencing report. calculations are almost entirely driven by the application of a 24 level loss enhancement, blah, blah, blah. So basically, there's a loss theory. So what this is about is you calculate points. You look at the maximum, the median, and you kind of figure out what would be an appropriate sentence, and you can do enhancements. So because of the amount of the loss to investors, which was calculated at $97 million, and that's not the total loss, that's only the loss for the crimes of which David Gentile was convicted. So you're basically in the pre-sentencing phase, you're figuring out either reductions in sentence, things that should take points off, or things that should enhance it. For example, in a bank robbery, if you use a note, it's one sentence, but if you use a gun, you get an sentence enhancement. So they're looking at these are sentencing formula. And his attorneys are arguing that the sentencing guidelines are not correct, and they should get a significant downward variance. So take it off of the 1,020 months or 85 years. It should not be 85 years. And now what's interesting is the lawyer says they should adjust the sentence downward because the guidelines dramatically overstate the seriousness of the offense conduct. Well, a lot of people died broke. There were 15,000 victims, and they're trying to downplay it. Again, David Gentile is saying he didn't do anything wrong. But when you my argument and that of, I think, the probation, when you harm 15,000 people financially, many of whom are older, or just anyone, you take their money. The investors have had their money locked up since 2018. They can't get it. That is violence, economic violence. Harming people by taking their money and defrauding them is economic violence. They suffer. In many cases, some of them lost their house, some of them died broke, and their estates are handling it. So it's a crime of violence to economically destroy somebody, especially seniors. Anybody, but especially seniors who are on a fixed income and trust you to get their 6% return a month. So, or 6% a year. So this is not trivial. This is a serious crime of violence. And it's an economic form of violence that, could drive some people to unalive themselves if they were broke. And so let's continue on. Now, this is a little bit technical. Let me get this part. Now, what the lawyers want, they want David Gentile to get no time at all. They want a non-incarceratory sentence, meaning he should not go to jail. They're arguing, so the feds are saying the guidelines are 85 years, and his lawyers are saying, oh, no, it's not serious. What he did was not serious, so he should do no prison time at all. The story here, the circumstances here reflect a clear story of a business that grew too quickly for its CEO to personally ensure the accuracy of every investor communication. And that's really what was at the matter. A part of the conviction was what they communicated to investors. It's more than that. The lawyers here are spinning. A business that grew too quickly. Well, one thing you should do if your business is growing too quickly, as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts noted in its civil lawsuit against GPB Capital and David Gentile, is that they were taking in money so fast because they were paying broker dealers 10% commission. In fact, David Gentile took money. Jeffrey Schneider took money, Senate Capital, so that by the time you invested $100,000 into GPB Capital, you were almost down 20%. You lost 20,000 right off the top. You lost about 15 to 20% right off the top in fees. So if you're taking in money faster than you can deploy it, you should just stop raising money. And, but because they were bringing it in so fast, they couldn't deploy it efficiently, and they wound up buying a lot of stupid investments because they were under pressure to spend the money. Yeah, OPS, no jail time at all, please. Even if they have the sentence, he'd still die in prison. Yes, and we're getting there. So the business grew too fast, and he couldn't control it. Well, the answer here, it says the circumstances here reflect a clear story of a business that grew too quickly for its CEO to personally ensure the accuracy of every investor communication. If you can't manage your goddamn business, then you hire people who can. That's the answer in business. Let me say that again. If you can't manage your goddamn business, then you hire someone who can. You step aside and you hire an expert who can handle that kind of business growth. So in other words, David Gentile is admitting that he was incompetent, that he was taking in money so fast he couldn't oversee everything. That means your business gets away from you. He's trying to make himself the victim again. Oh, it grew too fast. And all these investor communications, part of which led to my conviction, I just couldn't stay on top of. I don't buy that. And this document, I think, will insult the court. It insulted me. It insults the intelligence of anyone who's reading it, who knows about investing. If you can't handle your business, hire someone who can. Okay, you step aside, you be the chairman, and you get a good chief operating officer, a good CEO, and you let people who can handle it. Because I guarantee you, there's plenty of qualified executives, plenty of great people out there who can handle a business, plenty of men and women who can handle this kind of growth in business, and they're good at it. So you hire someone if you can't do it. If you get in over your head, you don't let your ego get in the way, especially with investor money. You hire someone who can do it because you can't. If you don't know your limitations in business, you don't belong in business, because something bad will happen and stuff will, yeah, exactly, Wayne. It's like drunk driving. Your intent doesn't matter. Yeah. And I'm watching Chris Hansen videos. I like Chris Hansen's work. It's amazing when he's interviewing predators. And all these guys try to argue that they just came over to meet the teenage girl, but they weren't going to actually have any, sex with them. And it's the same. This almost reminds me of a Chris Hansen interview with a predator, except the difference is money and not SA. I didn't have the intent to commit the crime. But Chris Hansen say, yeah, but you showed up. What am I to make of this? It's a Monday, 7 p.m. in Brookline, Massachusetts. You show up at a house to have with a girl you thought was 14. Chris Hansen knows how to just twist the knife. He's so good at it. So this kind of reminds me where David said, I was just bringing in so much money, I couldn't keep control of everything. Well, then you hire more staff, or you hire someone better than you to run the fucking company. That's what you do. To act like you're some innocent deer in the headlights with that kind of money. So David Gentile sold his expertise as a CPA. He sold Jeff Lash's expertise. He sold Schneider's expertise. And he sold the expertise of people. And yet he's saying way up at the top, I just couldn't handle it. No one's going to buy that. That's just stupid. His lawyers aren't helping him out here at all. So I was bringing in too much money and I didn't know how to handle a fast growing company. Well, that's why you use some of that money to hire an expert. Okay. Now, David Gentile's personal life, they go into this here, and a lot of people submitted letters. 75 people submitted letters on his behalf that reveal his kindness. They reveal his kindness. Oh, this is quite something, isn't it? So we go through here, David's early life and career. They redacted a lot of this for different reasons. And he spent his time as a CPA working for his father. And then David's role as a professional mentor to his colleagues and friends. Just a pillar of the community. a pillar of the community, just like David Miscavige or Grant Cardone. They're all pillars of the community. So he helped people. And anyway, this is on my blog. David's role as a devoted father to his 4 children. Well, that's not a good argument. You know what? That is not a good argument at all. You can have someone who robs a bank who's a devoted father. In fact, as often said of some of the mafia, uh, some people in Cosa Nostra, they were very devoted to their families. And yet they were involved in hijacking, murder, extortion, racketeering, but yet they were devoted fathers. That doesn't mean anything. If you commit a crime, it doesn't matter how devoted you are. You're a criminal. So to try to argue that you're a devoted father and yet you're a convicted felon, it doesn't matter. If you're convicted, no matter how devoted you are, that's not something that's going to sway the court. Oh, you're devoted to your children. Okay, we won't put you in prison because you're a devoted father. This again, to me, I think will insult the court's intelligence. But the court has seen it before. The argument is a non sequitur. I shouldn't go to prison because I'm a devoted father. Sorry, that doesn't wash. So there's a rehearsal of all this stuff. Now look at this. As young adults, David's children depend on him for advice and support during this crucial transitory period in their lives, and a long incarceratory sentence is likely to have a devastating impact on the Gentile family. Yeah, that's what happens when you commit a crime and you're convicted and you go to prison. It will have a devastating impact on your family, and that's why you shouldn't have committed the crime. In fact, if David Gentile is such a family man, such a devoted father, then he should have thought about not committing the crime with Schneider, where Schneider said, we have to man up and write the checks, meaning getting into a Ponzi-like scheme. Getting into a Ponzi-like scheme and using distributor money or using investor money to pay investors distributions. That's a Ponzi scheme. I will clarify, I've said this before, but GPB Capital was described as a Ponzi-like scheme, and a Ponzi-like scheme is different than a Ponzi scheme. In a Ponzi scheme, no actual assets are purchased. In a Ponzi-like scheme, actual assets are purchased. However, investor money is still used to pay investors, as in a Ponzi scheme. So if you don't want your family to go through a devastating time, your children to suffer a devastating loss of their father or mother, then you don't commit the crime. So to argue that David's children will be harmed if he's sent to prison, what about the 15,000 victims? They have been harmed. They've been harmed since 2018. They don't have their money. They've lost their money. I mean, the receiver is going to distribute some of it, as we'll get to, but what about the 15,000 victims and their families, how they suffered? What about them? See, again, this is the narcissism of David Gentile and Jeffrey Schneider. It's only about them. I'll suffer harm. Never mind about my victims. And in fact, he says something very insulting about the victims that I think the court will get really angry about. I know I would be outraged if I were the judge. So, yeah, that's what happens when you commit crimes, is your family's going to suffer, and it's all on you, David Gentile and Jeffrey Schneider. It's all on you. So, yeah, that's what happens. So, and they try to say that he's a family leader and caretaker to aging and ailing relatives. Well, again, if you cared about them, you wouldn't commit a crime. You wouldn't have done this to begin with. If you're that much of a saint of God, you would think, hey, I shouldn't commit a couple of felonies because that would, that would harm my family and my ability to care for them. This redacted stuff I'd love to get my hands on. David's kindness to friends and care for the community. Again, he didn't care for his 15,000 investors who he victimized. And so they black out a lot of this. So there's a recitation, and we don't know what it says, but it was blanked out. David's generosity and charitable work. Oh, this gets interesting. And we find out here that David, in the yellow portion, David also supports wide-reaching causes, including Youth for Human Rights, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, Drug-Free World. So he's supporting Scientology. But they don't use that word in court. He's not going to say Scientology's human trafficking, wealth extraction, family destroying cult. They just use Youth for Human Rights, and then the batshit crazy Citizens Commission on Human Rights and Drug-Free World. So David, that doesn't mean this is Scientology. Then it just goes on. This is reading like he's a poor fellow who got mixed up in a system and couldn't keep control of documents, as I said. David is a thoughtful and reliable businessman. I don't think so. Thoughtful and reliable businessmen don't get convicted of 5 felonies. Yeah. Wayne, Wayne, I don't think so. That Scientology wasn't. Scientology was very much in the background of this case, and this is a good question, Wayne. Scientology was very much in the background of the case. I have a list. I'm not going to give the name, but it's in the dozens of Scientologists who were involved. And it's not relevant to the case. It's not relevant to his conviction per se. But there are at least 10 Scientologists from whom David Gentile purchased their companies at excess prices, I allege. I think that's my opinion. And when federal forfeiture laws or clawback kicks in, there could be up to 10 Scientologists who may find themselves subject to clawback laws. And these are Clearwater Scientologists. When David Gentile was bringing in so much money, he was buying Scientologist-owned companies, and I think they donated some to the IAS. I don't know if there were kickbacks. I don't know. But I'm certainly looking into these matters. And the feds have the list I gave them. So there you go. And it's published on my blog. I published all the companies. Yeah, Scrapping Nurse. Scrapping Nurse, I like that title. Like, can I have some more? Can I have some more of that pain reliever? No, you cannot. But it hurts. So what? You know, that's just a funny title. I wonder how much money he forked over to Scientology. That we don't know altogether. And you know what? There's some Scientologists who donate money to Scientology. This is interesting, Scrapping Nurse. Doctor, please, some more of these, Mick Jagger sang in his song. And the nurses and doctors say, no, you're not getting any more of the good stuff. So we don't know that, but there are some Scientologists, they don't list their contributions. Scientology won't publish them or let them appear with their IES bowling trophies. And David Gentile is one of them. So this is something I want to know. And in the forfeiture phase, we'll find out, Scrappy Nurse. That's a great question. Thank you for being here. So David is a thoughtful and reliable businessman. That does not go with convicted of 5 felonies. So those two things don't go together. They are what we call an unlike set. Reliable, thoughtful and reliable businessman does not go with 5 felony convictions, unlike sets throughout the argument, because that just doesn't happen to thoughtful and reliable. And like if you bring in donuts to work, that's thoughtful, but if you're a crook, that's not really. So this thing goes on. It's just like it just goes on and on, blah, 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 blah. I read through the whole thing, and a lot of it was bullshit, excuse me. A lot of it was just BS. But the offense conduct, that's actually what you did that you were guilty for. This will be interesting to read. And then the sentencing guidelines. This is where you get down into the weeds. This is so interesting how the feds. So the PSR calculates an advisory guidelines offense level of 43. So for those of you who know the criminal justice system at the federal level of the United States government, the guideline offense level here says 43 and recommends guideline sentence of 1,020 months, tempered only by the statutory maximum for securities and wire fraud, which is 20 years imprisonment. So what happens is it looks like the feds are going to ask for 20 years because there's a cap on the charges, even though the actual monetary damages and other points call for 1,020 months. It appears that the prosecutors are going to ask for 20 years. However, as I understand the matter, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so he's subject to up to 85 years. As I read it, and I'm not a lawyer, the feds are going to ask for 20 years. And the judge has the discretion to sentence higher, above the guidelines of the 20 years. So, oh, by the way, sentencing was March 6th, but the I understand on the calendar, sentencing for David Gentile and Jeffrey Schneider in New York has been moved from March 6th to March 13th. It's been moved ahead a week, 1 week. And I don't know if they take them into custody or if they wear an ankle bracelet and then they're ordered to surrender. It depends if David Gentile is deemed a flight risk. And that's a court determination Her Honor makes. Her Honor, the judge, Girardi, I believe. So we have the feds asking for 20. And this is an interesting thing here, this next sentence. The PSR pre-sentencing report is also incorrect in applying enhancements for an offense involving 10 or more victims. This is a technical argument. To invest in GPB capital, you had to be an accredited investor, which means you have $1 million net worth in addition to your house. And therefore, as accredited investors, you knew the risks you were taking. Therefore, the enhancement for an offense involving 10 or more victims, the points they add should not be applied because these were accredited investors and they knew they could lose all their money. Yes, but the point is, accredited investors are trusting that you're honest and you're not a criminal. So that's the misleading part here. Even though the accredited investors knew they could lose all their money, they had a right to expect that David Gentile and Jeffrey Schneider were not fucking criminals. Okay, so that's the difference. That's the difference. Excuse my strong language, but this is called for here, I think. Now, they're arguing the government failed to establish stuff, but it established it at court. And the pre-sentencing report, this is the bottom sentence, government position states that investors, this is the magic number, funds suffered $97 million in actual losses. Now, those go to the number's probably a lot higher, but this is on the charged offenses. And basically that's the loss, $97 million. And that's in addition to, so that's an enhancement. That dollar amount's an enhancement to sentencing that pushes it up to the 85 years. 10 or more victims is another enhancement, and there's other enhancements. So when they're mixing a sentence, oh, hi, Mischief Managed. Late again. It's okay. Better late than never, and you can watch on the replay. Yeah, she did miss the kitty cat who's run off somewhere. Oh, no, she's asleep. Felix fell asleep. So it's a $97 million actual losses. Now, for the purposes of sentencing, and this is technical, I talked to a sentencing expert, and I may try to get her on the show, but she may not want to do a podcast with me. So I think it'd be interesting for true crime to explain things. And so investor capital included in distribution payments does not constitute actual loss. Yeah, that one didn't work at court, did it? That one did not work during trial. A lot of this, I must say, um, a, a lot of what's going on in this long 38 pages of blathering is David Gentile is trying to relitigate his case. He's trying to relitigate it. And this is common. You try to argue your case again before the court in a pre-sentencing memorandum. So he's just relitigating it. This all came out at trial, and the court's going to see he's trying to relitigate it. The arguments did not work at trial, will not work here. So relitigating your case as if the court didn't hear it and the jury didn't hear it, that goes on all the time. Yes, wake up, Osa. Time to hit the like button. I think, Osa, you should give me a like and a follow, and that would be a stat for me. Actually, no, that'd probably get you locked up. You would probably, I think, Patrick, yeah, Osa should give me a like, but that would be a departure from the ideal scene. That's our word of the day, our term of the day, a departure from the ideal scene. If Osa gave me a like and subscribe, that would be a departure from the ideal scene to give an SP a like and a subscribe. We don't want a departure from the ideal scene because then they could be locked away in Scientology jail. Patrick, I know. So this is all relitigating the case. The court doesn't want to hear it. They tried it. They had their 7-week trial, blah, blah, blah. So let's just throw out all the relitigation. That's wasted pages. But it's money. It's money for their attorneys. They're getting paid to write that. This is just blathering stuff. Oh, this is, and so David, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now this one, this again is an argument that because they were accredited investors and they knew they could lose their money, they shouldn't apply that. They should say, well, you guys knew you investors knew they could lose all their money, and so but the point I made earlier stands. Investors relied upon the assumption that these people were honest and were not criminals, so that just gets tossed. The other thing I want to get, the offense level overstates the seriousness of the offense conduct. Again, I said, what about the victims? This severe, extensive, long-term damage. They haven't been paid. They haven't seen their money since 2018. They're going to lose a large part of it, even now that the company's in receivership. It's a very serious offense. That's why there's an 85-year on it. They'll probably do 20. I think it looks like they'll do 20. Now, this is interesting. His attorneys argue that David faces a total offense level of 43, a level identical to the base offense level for first-degree premeditated murder. Yeah, well, in a lot of ways, you did kill those people when you destroyed their savings, and yeah, and so when you defraud 15,000 people and you destroyed their lives because they don't have their money, yeah, they're trying to argue that it's wrong, but this is a serious crime. And this argument here, you can see how seriously it's treated, that even his lawyers say that's this base offense level for premeditated murder. Well, yeah, crime is crime, and there's a way the government measures it. But that's a non sequitur. It doesn't matter if it's identical to the base offense level for first degree murder. You've got $97 million in losses. You've got 15,000 victims. Yeah, it's a significant and serious and substantial crime. They're trying to argue that David is a first-time offender. Well, if you're going to be a first-time offender, if you're going to commit a crime, do something big. Don't steal a moped. Go after 1.8 billion. But this goes to if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. So being a first-time offender, that's true. Does not have any priors, but this is a huge offense. The argument is kind of stupid to say he's a first-time offender. It's sort of like someone who murders. Uh, if they don't have a prior criminal record, but they murder someone, that's a first-time offense, but it's still murder. First-time bank robbery, kidnapping, SA. Danny Masterson was a first-time offender. He didn't have a prior criminal record until he picked up those 3 charges. So you can see to say Danny Masterson's a first-time offender. That wouldn't work because of the horrific nature of his crimes. So I just worked on a case where there was a fight among family members. Someone got shoved to the ground, hit their head on the concrete, and the victim went into a coma and died. So it went from an assault at a park to manslaughter. The defendant, who was had never had a clean record, and she, in a drunken fight at a park, kills a relative. First time offense, but you commit the crime, it doesn't matter. It's the seriousness of it. So in my opinion, that David Gentile was a first time offender, that doesn't mitigate the seriousness or the viciousness of his crime toward his victims, or the amount of $97 million lost. And it's going to be more. Yes, but we're not going to go there, Joseph. I am familiar with that whole thing, and we're not doing that right now. We'll do RV some other time. But yes, I am very familiar. And first time offender with 15,000 victims. Yeah, it's a big first time. Yeah, he did. He sure came out with a bang. He sure did, Willie Pickton was a first time offender, and he had offed 50 plus people. Wow. On your first time. That's a good point. Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't think he had a prior convictions. I don't think there were any prior convictions. So good point there. So, and get this point. Get out your Kleenex, and you can just cry for poor David. Get out your hankies and Kleenex, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so this part is just BS. I can't believe he'd had the gall to say that. Okay. Pre-sentencing guidelines would represent cruel and unusual punishment. The Eighth Amendment prohibits as cruel and unusual punishment a severe punishment that is patently unnecessary. Gentile is actually trying to argue that ripping off $1.8 billion from 15,000 people, him going to jail for even 20 years would be cruel and unusual, and that he should get house arrest. Can you believe the nerve of this guy? The nerve of this guy. It's cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah, I stole and ripped off and destroyed people's lives. Many, and it's my first offense, but it's cruel and unusual to send me to prison. It's a violation of the Eighth Amendment. It's cruel and unusual punishment. Oh, spare me. Just spare me. I think I might fly to New York for the sentencing just to be in the courtroom. I want to see this guy. And I was there when Masterson was sentenced and handcuffed and led away. So what he's asking for is non-custodial sentence is appropriate. Non-custodial. I don't want to go to jail. Yeah, I bet you don't. You're 58 years old. David Gentile is 58 years old, and suddenly he doesn't want to go to prison. He thinks that, he says, since I'm appealing it and I don't agree with the jury, I don't think I should have to go to jail. The federal guidelines are 85 years. So 85 years, and you want house arrest. I'll wear an ankle bracelet. That's not going to work. He's going to do 20. And yeah. Oh, Wayne, good point. The serial Killer doctor in the UK was a first-time offender. His victims may have been in the triple digits. Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, see, that's the whole weakness of arguing. Um, Also, first offense here is defined as got caught and convicted, may have committed many crimes before. That's a good point. That's a good point, Car, Charlotte, Char. That's a good point, Char. Yeah, he got caught. I'm sure he's committed something before, you know. Um, Sorry, folks, have to run. Stay safe, all. Okay, Wayne, glad you were here. Have a good rest of your day or evening. And remember, Wayne, don't engage in any departures from your ideal scene. We want you to have a wonderful life and an ideal scene. So, yeah, this is the thing about uh, I don't want to go to prison. Yeah, I'm sure you don't. And then at point A says the nature and circumstances of the offense weigh in favor of lenience. Says who? It's David Gentile. Weigh in favor of lenience. Yeah, sure. The judge, tell it to the judge. I don't want to hear it. And then David Gentile does this bizarre thing. David set out to build a novel business in the private equity industry. Not really. That's what they tried to push. But basically, he's making the Grant Cardone argument that he opened the big investments to the little guy. So he's actually doing some marketing. This was bizarre to me as a business person. He's actually doing marketing. He's asking for leniency, but yet he's still pitching his business. David set out to build a novel business, but wound up a criminal. Anyway, he goes through why he was so novel and what happened. And there's some relitigation. And because he grew so fast, he was unable to stay in compliance. And so it's a novel business. He's a prince of a fellow, but he argues here that he was too incompetent to control his business. Oh, here he says 17,000 investors. Okay, so I heard the number 15,000, but here he's saying 17,000. There are some fluctuations, but that's the first number where David Gentile himself says 17. The government's been saying 15,000. So it said GPB ultimately acquired over 160 businesses with an employee headcount of approximately 6,000 people. I think that number is too high. And again, this is an argument that business got out of him, and he was a victim of his own success. That's the argument Gentile is trying to make: is I was so successful that my business got away from me, and I grew so fast, my business got away from me. I had 6,000 people, and there was just so much to do. It just got away from me. I didn't have an intent to commit crime. Oh, but you did. Specifically, wire fraud with Jeff Lash. That was Jeff Lash pled to and allocated. And the wire fraud, it was really simple. Jeff Lash transferred from his private account $1.2 million to GPB Capital, and David Gentile booked it as revenue. That's wire fraud. That's conspiracy. So his defense was, I was just too stupid to handle it. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. It just got away from me. I was so successful and novel, and money was just pouring in because of my brilliance, but I didn't know how to handle it. And what did I say earlier? Hire someone who can handle it. If you don't know what the hell you're doing with that much money, then hire an expert who knows. Hire someone who knows what they're doing. Don't try to be the boss of everything. You have to learn how to delegate, but this was not it. If you've been following it for 5 years, and I've read all the court work, the FBI had people wear wires into meetings, and there were discussions that were criminal in nature, and former staff executives testified against him. So this thing is but I'm a Scientologist, the most ethical religious fake in the world. Yes, that's our ideal scene. So yeah, that's his argument: is I'm so successful. I shouldn't go to jail because my family will suffer. I'm a wonderful humanitarian, and I just couldn't keep control of everything. And it goes on. There is nothing inherently unlawful about GPB's business model. The jury disagreed. With all due respect, the jury disagreed. It was criminal in nature. So a lot of this is just expensive lawyering. The performance guarantees were used to benefit investors. No, they were used to mislead, deceive investors. They were used to deceive because they were written by Satan, the devil. David genuinely believed that investors would ultimately profit for their investments in GPB funds. Yeah, that's why he was taking fees at every turn. That's why he was screwing his investors. It doesn't matter what David genuinely believed. It mattered what he actually did. Not what he believed, what he actually did. He engaged in felony conduct and was convicted. So what he believed, this argument doesn't wash. He had the best intentions in mind. Sorry, you actually committed the crime. And so then it just goes on. A non-custodial sentence provides just punishment. Nope. Tells the judge, you're going down. You're going to the big house, Gentile. You're going to the big house. And that ends out this doc. I want to show you, suitable alternatives to custodial sentence are available. I don't think so. I think he goes, he wants supervised released. No, that's not going to happen. So that's that. Anyway, that's the argument. But now Ethan Suplee, how does he get into the mix? Well, I will tell you how. Okay, so when you get sentenced, and Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis learned this the hard way, you have people write letters for you saying how wonderful you are and why you shouldn't get a long prison sentence of 85 years or even 20. And Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis wrote letters for Danny Masterson. Boy, did they get put into the chip shredder of culture. Eesh. And then they deserved it too, because they thought their letters would be private, but they weren't. So in another document, your humble correspondent, me, here's an interesting thing. Okay, now these are the letters. These are the letters written. Now, follow me here. Here's what happened. Okay, so Jeffrey Schneider had letters written for him. I think they were 55. Don't hold me to it because I've been looking at numbers all day. 55 for Jeffrey Schneider. Those were publicized for some reason. We know the names of the people who wrote letters for David Gentile, but those letters were sealed by the court. That tells now Jeffrey Schneider, his criminal co-defendant, not a Scientologist, but nevertheless departed from the ideal scene with 4 felonies. So I think after Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis got their asses kicked for writing a letter defending Danny, the Church of Scientology stepped in and said, "Whoa, stop," and told David Gentile's attorneys, or had David tell them, get the letters from your supporters sealed so we don't face any embarrassment. But in this one letter, because the letters are sealed, I know that for a fact. So we have the names of all the people who wrote letters. We just don't have the letters. And so there's 75 letters. It looks largely from, these are largely from family members. We do have Matt Judkin, a Scientology. He got in trouble down in Texas for a scheme. So Matt Judkin wrote a letter, and I just have to get over here. So we have, Evan Marianthopoulos, who worked at the company, wrote a letter, and we're going down the list. So there's friends, family, it'll tell cousin, friend, family, blah, blah, blah. So Constantine Hogg is Hammer Hogg. Connie Hogg is a Scientologist. He has Hammer Hogg Steel in Clearwater. Brandy Lewis Suplee, wife of, down at the bottom there, A58, Ethan Suplee, wrote a letter. Now, how are Ethan Suplee and David Gentile related? And so my question, how is Ethan Suplee in the mix that he would write a letter, he and his wife, Mrs. Suplee, Brandy, who is the sister of Juliette Lewis? How did Ethan Suplee, what financial relationship, if any, did he have to David Gentile? How does Ethan Suplee know David Gentile? That's what we have to find out. That's what we have to find out. And so please reach out and contact me, Jeffrey Augustine at gmail.com. So I want to know why Ethan Suplee is defending a guy who's convicted of 5 felonies. Why, Ethan? And also your wife, Brandy, wrote a letter. I can understand everyone else, but, was there a financial relationship? Why would Ethan Suplee? So that's what I'm investigating. That is what I'm investigating, is what's the connection between Ethan Suplee and convicted Scientologist David Gentile? And so this is the names of everyone. And Lex Heslin, he was a consultant to GPB Capital. So there were plenty of names I expected to see. It's going to be, your friends and family are going to write letters. But Ethan Suplee, that surprised me because I've been following this case for 5 years, blogging about it. I never once saw Ethan Suplee. So he's in the mix somehow. We don't know, but I aim to find out. So these are all the exhibits. And then there's a lot more exhibits, but I won't, there's like a whole bunch of other exhibits filed in this recent spate of court filings. Nothing, we'll just do another show because there's some other interesting data. The correct word is data. That's how L. Ron Hubbard would say it. So we've learned that David Gentile, his maximum sentence could be 85 years. The feds apparently are asking for 20 based on the maximum sentence for the charges of which Mr. Gentile was convicted. But the judge could go higher. And David Gentile's position is, I don't belong in jail. That's a departure from my ideal scene. I can't be a humanitarian. Oh, yeah. But he didn't steal money from me. True. He can't go to jail because he needs his money. Yes. Judging by the length of this document, his lawyers are not stupid. No, they get paid by the hour. I should have E. Stuart Mills on to go through this. I think I will. I think I'll have E. Stuart Mills on to talk about my client shouldn't go to jail for 85 years or 20. But is she be incarcerated at home? So there has been a departure from the ideal scene. And David, is March 13 is headed your way like a Venusian freight locomotive moving at top speed. So that light in the tunnel you see is not good. So that's it for Scientology and crime. Scientology and true crime. But Ethan Suplee, call me if you want. Email me. If you want to do a podcast, I'm all up for that. If you know something. So maybe you want to defend, you wrote a letter defending your friend David Gentile, and I'd be interesting. Yeah, all I heard in those Masterson letters, but look how many people he didn't grape. He's been, yeah, look at all the people. God, that's a brutal comment. That's brutal satire, but true. Yeah, he's been so nice to me and my dogs, and that's it. So the letter I'm waiting to write about the very wealthy Scientologist, the very wealthy Scientologist, it might be delayed a week. I was going to try to have it this week. And it's about another faction of the Scientology Money Club. And I just have to clear some, I just have to do some more investigation, research. And I just have to do some more research. Yeah. And the way you pronounce data L. Ron Hubbard, if you're in Scientologist, data, D-A-T-U-H. The data indicates that there has been a departure from the ideal scene here. By the way, that 4K footage that Mark Bunker put out of L. Ron Hubbard was amazing. It just, his teeth. See, mine are nice. So thank you for watching. That's an update. And Walmart magic can come out of a special calculator. So we'll see what happens. I think he gets 20 years or more, depending on what the judge does. So that's the quandary in which David Gentile finds himself. He claims he was the victim of a business that grew too fast and got out of control, and he just failed to do some paperwork. That's like Gary Cardone in a recent video argued that he had to spend $7 million fighting the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they told him he was a bad boy. Gary tried to spin it like the government hassled him for chargebacks 911. Oh no, Gary Cardone, it was more serious than that. And they didn't just tell you were a bad boy. The government wasn't just riding your ass to harass you. There was $250 million in chargeback fraud from some people who went to prison. So we're going to do an episode on that, Gary. We're going to do an episode on that because I caught your video where you tried to brush off, because if it was just government harassment, you wouldn't spend $7 million in it, and you wouldn't be having that lawsuit for civil RICO now. But that Gary Cardone will be our next podcast on Scientology Money Project, where we cover Scientology crime, lies, legal matters, and money. Your host, Jeffrey Augustine. We have to jump off because I have a 7:30 with some dear friends of mine. So thank you so much for watching. As always, appreciate you being here. We're going to start up the music. And so stay tuned. Maybe, Brendana. Oh, yeah, tell him to hold. So let's go out with the big B1.